There's a quiet shift happening in Jewish leadership. More and more women are taking up roles at the top or carving out unique leadership roles of their own creation. On Women's Gallery podcast, Joanne Greenaway, CEO of the London School of Jewish Studies, meets normal women who are also superstar trailblazers, exploring their personal journeys of discovering and growing into their leadership potential in education, community, Jewish law, Torah study, advocacy, healthcare, technology, politics, and more. Coming in a couple of days is Joanne's newest episode, a very inspiring interview with Rachel Sharansky-Danziger that you will not want to miss. I've heard it, and it's exceptional. Step into Women's Gallery to hear what happens when women bring their full selves to the center of Jewish life. Follow Women's Gallery on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and look for a link in the show notes. I also want to tell you about the newest episode of Intimate Judaism, which just dropped last night. In this episode, entitled Don't Look, Don't Tell, Tali Rosenbaum and I tackle a question that many Orthodox couples have encountered, but few people talk about openly. When halachic guidance intersects with women's need to understand their own bodies. Our guests, Yoetzet Halacha Lisa Septimus and Malka Chana Amichai, explore the tension between the common advice, don't look, in the context of Hilchot Nidah, and the importance of body literacy, medical awareness, and informed halachic practice. It's a thoughtful conversation about autonomy, anxiety, and empowerment within the framework of Torah and halacha. You can listen to the full episode of Intimate Judaism wherever you get your podcasts, on the Intimate Judaism website, intimatejudaism.com, or simply click on the link in the show notes.
We have to stop thinking about anxiety as a disease, stop thinking about it as the enemy, stop thinking about it as a curse. It's not. And start thinking about it as an internal tool, as a mechanism that we have built into us as human beings to do good things, to connect, to be more aware of ourselves, to be more connected to others, and to be connected spiritually, to be connected to God. That's what it's for. It's a tool. And when you think about it that way, it's not a disorder and it's not a disease. It's part of the human condition that was given to us in order to be able to do good things with it.
I'm Scott Kahn, and this is The Orthodox Conundrum. This is The Orthodox Conundrum on JewishCoffeehouse.com. I'm Scott Kahn. Over the past few years, and certainly over the past week, anxiety has become part of the background noise of Jewish life. People in Israel are living with sirens and uncertainty, with children in the army. People in the diaspora are following the news constantly, worrying about family, about Israel, about growing antisemitism, about the future and their place in the world. And even beyond the current moment, anxiety has become something many of us talk about openly in ways we didn't a generation ago. Usually when we talk about anxiety, the assumption is simple. Anxiety is something to eliminate, something to suppress, or something to cure. But what if that assumption is wrong? My guest today, Dr. David Rosmarin, is a clinical psychologist, associate professor at Harvard Medical School, and the founder of the Center for Anxiety. He argues that while anxiety can be a disorder, it more often is nothing of the sort and not even necessarily a problem. In fact, he says, anxiety is a built-in human tool which can sharpen our awareness, deepen our relationships, strengthen resilience, and even push us towards greater spiritual growth. In our conversation, we talk about how anxiety works, why modern culture may misunderstand it, and how Jewish ideas like emunah, bitachon, and even daily rituals like tefillah can help us engage anxiety in healthier and more productive ways. Dr. Rosmarin also shares a simple 4-step framework for working with anxiety. Identify it, share it, embrace it, and finally, learn to let go of the illusion that we control everything. This isn't a conversation about pretending everything is fine. It's a conversation about how human beings, and particularly Jews with a long spiritual tradition, can live honestly with uncertainty, with enhanced faith. So if you felt anxious lately, and who hasn't, I think you'll find this discussion both practical and deeply thoughtful and meaningful. And we'll get to it in just a moment. First, remember to subscribe to the Orthodox Conundrum podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate it and write a review. Continue the conversation on Facebook by joining the Orthodox Conundrum discussion group. Finally, the best way to promote your organization, your business, or yourself is to create a high-quality podcast, and JCH Podcast Productions can help you make that happen. Whether you want to learn how to start your own podcast or want to improve the podcast you already produce, we will make it happen. Write to us at aliza@jewishcoffeehouse.com. That's ALIZA at jewishcoffeehouse.com, and let's get started with your high-quality, memorable, and effective podcast. David H. Rosmarin, PhD, is Chief Clinical Officer of the Links Network and an Associate Professor at Harvard Medical School. A clinical psychologist, researcher, and author of Thriving with Anxiety, he is known for reframing anxiety as a driver of growth rather than a disorder to eliminate. His clinical work spans individuals, couples, and families, and his teams have supported over 100,000 people. His work has been featured on Good Morning America, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, The Boston Globe, and TED.com. Dr. David Rosmarin, thank you very much for joining me today on the Orthodox Conundrum podcast.
It's an honor and pleasure. I wish it were under better circumstances, but it's an honor and pleasure to be here.
Well, hopefully what we talk about today can help some of us manage better or to deal with the anxiety that the current circumstances have engendered. So before speaking about specifics, I want to mention Alana Gelnick's excellent podcast, Stream of Dreamerly, where I first heard you speak. And here's a quote from the very beginning of the episode on which you appeared, which I will link in the show notes. "We are totally getting this emotion wrong in our society to the detriment of many people." You're speaking about anxiety. Now, most of us think about anxiety as something that must be overcome, ignored, treated, or dismissed. So here's my loaded question. How is that incorrect?
Okay, so let's get a couple things straight. If you can't sleep, and I mean like literally can't sleep, if you can't function, if you cannot engage with your family, if you're not able to do what you need to do, that is an anxiety disorder, which is different than the emotion of anxiety. Just like depression is a disorder and sadness is an emotion, we have the only problem with anxiety is that we use the same language. We call it anxiety. So when people are anxious, they automatically think that they have a disorder, but you don't. If you're able to function and able to do what you need to do, then that's normal. That's part of life. And I would add, given the situation in Israel today, if you're not feeling anxious, that's an indication something's wrong.
Okay, then let's talk about the situation in Israel right now, both for Jews who are living here where I am in Israel and for Jews in the diaspora where you are right now. So we all experience it in different ways, but in all cases, people are feeling, as you just said, heightened anxiety. From your perspective, given that you work closely with religious individuals too,
Sure.
What are some of the common ways people experience anxiety during moments like this? What are, in other words, some of its classic manifestations?
I don't think it's different for religious individuals than non-religious individuals. Anxiety is anxiety. If you have a family and you care about them and then there are, missiles flying overhead and there are people dying, you're going to be nervous. You're going to feel on edge. You're going to feel apprehensive. You're going to be worried. You're going to be thinking, what's the next steps? You're going to be calculating, how close am I to a bomb shelter? How close am I to a mamad? And all of that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean something's wrong. That means that you're alert. That means that you're aware. And some people might even not call that anxiety. I want to clarify, and that's a good thing. But you're more aware, you're more alert, you're more, to some degree, on edge. You're more, where are my kids right now? What am I doing right now? I mean, this is an Orthodox podcast, so I'll say we call it Yireh Shamayim. I mean, there's a certain fear of heaven where you're clued into the reality of whatever it is you're facing. And when there's a danger and it's in front of you and it's happening, well then, if you're not alert, then that's in some ways a lack of Yireh Shamayim. It's not a good thing.
Well, in that case, then when does healthy alertness or vigilance cross the boundary into unhealthy anxiety, or whatever term you want to use for that which is unhealthy?
It's exactly the question. And the answer is when it starts getting in the way of your life, as opposed to doing something that helps to move you forward. And that's where I think we have to stop thinking about anxiety as a disease, stop thinking about it as the enemy, stop thinking about it as a curse. It's not. And start thinking about it as an internal tool, as a mechanism that we have built into us as human beings to do good things, to connect, to be more aware of ourselves, to be more connected to others, and to be connected spiritually, to be connected to God. That's what it's for. It's a tool. And when you think about it that way, it's not a disorder and it's not a disease. It's part of the human condition that was given to us in order to be able to do good things with it. And many people in Israel are doing this every day.
I understand what you mean, but at the same time, I feel that people generally have a visceral assumption that anxiety is something that you want to eliminate or at least lessen to the degree that is possible, even if it is a positive emotion in some ways. Meaning they can say, be vigilant, but don't get too scared, don't get anxious. And you're saying that's not really true. I still want to I guess it's maybe not possible in just a few minutes, but where is that line drawn? I realize you say if it's not affecting the way that I act in a negative way, if I can't sleep, but still, sometimes I feel like if someone's overcome with anxiety, if they're feeling heaviness in a way which is not leading them to something positive, that's something which they would probably want to lessen. Am I wrong?
Well, again, you're talking about the feelings and discomfort as opposed to the effect that it has. And nobody's saying anxiety is fun. The best way I can give you an example about this is resilience. Everyone wants to be resilient, right? Which parent doesn't want to have resilient kids?
Absolutely.
Especially Jewish parents. How many Jewish parents are you going to ask and say, do you want to not have resilient kids? Do you want your kids to not be resilient, right? Like no one's going to say yes to that. Do you want to have resilient kids? Like everyone's going to sign them up. How do you build resilience?
I suppose you're going to say, and it makes sense, through dealing with failure.
Of course. Failure, struggle, adversity, anxiety. That struggle, it creates pressure and tension, which creates strength. Inner strength comes from dealing with that pressure and tension. Just like you go to the gym and you have to press against resistance, physical resistance to build your muscles, physical resistance to build your cardiovascular system. So you need emotional resistance to build your emotional system. It's really that simple.
That's very, very interesting. It's a different way of thinking about something. As you say, it makes sense. But at the same time, we're so used to people saying, well, don't be anxious. Don't have that anxiety. Take a pill. Do something which can get rid of it. I'm just not used to hearing it in those terms.
It's an American myth, and it's also a myth that has created an anxiety epidemic in the United States, which is worse than in Israel. The last data I've seen is that anxiety disorders, and again, granted, this is before the last couple of years, it's a couple of years out, but were 4 times as likely to occur in Americans compared to Israelis.
Anxiety disorders.
Correct.
Are those disorders that you would consider disorders or that others call disorders? You mean
Clinical
actual disorders?
Clinical disorders which are getting in the way of a person's life, causing significant stress and certainly distress, but significant dysfunction day to day. There's no question. Americans, the number 2 cause of death for individuals under 35 in the United States today is suicide.
So to what do you attribute that difference and that distinction between Israelis and Americans, to the degree that you can suppose the answer might be?
I'll tell you I have a 4-step process that I've developed using 25 years of clinical wisdom distilled into 4 simple steps to use anxiety in a positive, constructive way. I think those steps are naturally used much more within Israeli culture than within American culture. There's a general healthiness in terms of approach. Now, granted, that's been permeated, and I think the Western medicine has had a massive impact on, even in Israel, on perspectives on mental health, to the detriment of the country. But I think in general, the natural default approach of Israelis actually takes these 4 steps just naturally. They're much more intuitive and part of the culture and fabric of the society there.
Okay, I'm waiting here with bated breath. What are the 4 steps?
Okay, you ready? I'm going to transform.
I'm ready. Go for it, please.
By the way, I have not tested them out in an active war situation. So, full disclosure on that. This is the first one to me and making me a little anxious, but I think I can handle that one.
And full disclosure, as an American living in Israel, I'm sure I am not representative of that Israeli culture that you're talking about that's so good in this way. Maybe my kids are, but I'm sure I'm not.
Okay. I mean, well, you're still there. Better than me. Okay. The 4 steps are as follows: identify, share, embrace, let go. Identify, share, embrace, let go. Okay, I'll explain. Identify is to recognize what it is that you're afraid of. Most times when people feel anxious, they stop that feeling. They do whatever they can to stop the feeling. And I think don't take that approach. It's like, just understand, identify what is it that you are afraid of. As opposed to just pushing it out of your mind and immediately reaching for some salve to try to get rid of the feelings. Take a minute, feel anxious, allow yourself to feel it, and just process in your mind, what am I afraid of? Usually, it makes sense why you are feeling anxious. In the situation in Israel today, like it's obvious, but even beyond that, it usually makes sense.
I mean, it's important to understand not only the fact that I'm anxious, but the specific reason why. I'm
Yes,
going to give a reason right now. For example, I might be anxious because I'm afraid I might not get to a mamad on time, but it could be I'm anxious because I'm afraid of what might happen with Hezbollah in the north and my kid might have
that's
to go into
true.
Lebanon in the army. And it's
100%.
important to understand what exactly that thing is.
100%. And you
Okay.
can even drill down further. Like, people say, well, I'm afraid of dying. Like, what do you say to that, doctor? Like, okay, mazel tov. Um, it's usually not just a fear of death. It's usually a fear of I would be at fault for my death, or I made a mistake, or I'm going to be responsible because I'm not near a mamad, or because I'm not doing this, or because I'm not taking care of my kids, or I can't handle that, and that's my fault. I mean, if you think about it, like would most people like if they knew like this is just the way it needs to be, like with in Israel especially, given all the given all the incredible spiritual and religious resources in the culture, I think a lot of people would be like, okay, like what can I do? But it's not only about death. It's not only about destruction. It's about something usually deeper. How would that affect my relationships? How would that affect everything? I mean, if something were to, God forbid, what were to, God forbid, happen? It's important to penetrate the surface and actually spend a couple minutes thinking about what you're really anxious about. Um, yeah,
Does that mean to allow ourselves to go all the way to those places we don't want to think about? As
not
in,
yet.
I'm afraid of X, which might lead to Y, which might lead to Z. And then I'm thinking about these terrible scenarios that might be outlandish, maybe not so outlandish, but that's what I'm really afraid of, the chas v'shalom scenarios.
God forbid. Not yet. That's step three. We'll get there. Step one is just to penetrate the surface a little bit and to understand what it is that you're afraid of.
All right, how about step two?
Step two. Step two is to share it with someone else. The last Iranian war, the 12-day war, I got, I don't know how many phone calls from people in Israel. And one of the major issues was sleep. People are just up all night. Like, although it was just blasting all night and running up and down and with kids, and it was just hectic.
And that's
But
happening again now.
I know. Um,
You might
I
see the
know.
lines next to my eyes.
Yeah, everyone's right. But there was something else which I think went on because it was so like constant and there weren't any pauses. And it was also like the first time that had ever really happened. People weren't talking about it as much because they were mivuval. They just didn't have the time to sit and have a phone call or have a conversation with a friend or a loved one. And this time around, I'm not seeing that because I think there are more pauses between incidents, between sirens, and people who I'm speaking with are more aware of their feelings and they're sharing it more. Share is about not being alone with your anxiety.
Hmm. Okay,
It's a
interesting.
chazal, by the way. Daiga b'leivish yasichana. If you have a worry in your heart, tell it over to someone else.
So simply speaking it out to somebody
Correct.
is part and parcel of the managing of once you've identified it.
Correct. And there's a deep reason for it. It's because anxiety is supposed to connect us to others. And when you use that negative energy to create a bond with another person, you've actually turned the anxiety into a strength because you've created that vulnerability that you feel. Instead of getting calloused over and getting angry or getting edgy, you've actually shown that feeling to another and created more closeness with that person.
Well, when you say anxiety is supposed to connect us to another, that sounds almost like a religious statement rather than a clinical statement. Is it both?
To me, it's a religious thing. And I think, though, it doesn't have to be. I think interpersonal connection doesn't necessarily have to be a frum kind of deal. But I think within Israeli culture, people are more likely to do this. They put down their phones, they go out for lunch, they have a conversation when they're having a struggle. The Israeli army does this, where people actually speak about their feelings. Commanders have conversations with soldiers about what was that like? How are you feeling right now? In the American Army, there's barely. It's not. It's more psychologically minded and less psychologically sophisticated.
Interesting. Okay, I guess we should move on to embrace, which is the third step.
Okay, this is the hard one. But the truth is, everyone in Israel is doing this. Embrace means to face your anxiety head on as opposed to running away from it. The more you resist against anxiety and stay in an anxious state, it actually does make you stronger. It makes you more resilient, even if you just sit in it and don't do anything. It doesn't feel like it, but that's the point. The fact that it's difficult makes you a stronger human being emotionally.
How is this different than identify?
Identify, you have to feel a little bit anxious in order to identify what it is that you're thinking. But the goal is a cognitive one. Oh, I'm afraid of this. Of course, that's what I'm afraid of. If you avoid all of it emotionally, you won't be able to get there cognitively. Here, you're actually doing something. For anxiety disorders, we would have people do something that makes them anxious, like speak to a stranger if they have social anxiety. Or if they have obsessive compulsive disorder, they might, you know, put their hands in a toilet. Seriously.
Okay, well, in this case, what would embrace mean? For example, let's say someone is afraid they're not going to reach the mamad on time. Let's take an easy
Right.
example. Or they're afraid that they won't be able to protect their kids. So how would that person embrace the anxiety?
I can think of a couple things. Firstly, I wouldn't do anything dangerous. Like obviously, we're not talking about, facing fears we're not talking about facing danger. We're talking about facing fears. But it is important in one's mind's eye to be able to say like, well, you know, this is a God forbid scenario. Like we don't know. And we don't know. None of us know, even here in the United States. I mean, terror cells, like there's all sorts of crazy stuff that could happen. And it's important not to just avoid it, but actually to be able to go there in your mind. Because that creates a strength and a resolve and a resilience to be able to handle difficulty in life.
So in that case, you would simply acknowledge what you're afraid of. I'm still trying to figure out what that embrace would mean in a
Yeah.
case like we're talking about now.
Yeah. I would say for 3 minutes a day, let your mind go there. Schedule time to worry. Don't worry about it at a low level throughout your day. Worry about it as an intense level for 3 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. Many times when people are talking to their kids, some kids do need to hear like everything's okay, like we're all fine, and like I get that. Like a naturally anxious kid might need a little bit. At the same time, that naturally anxious kid also has to learn to face their own fears and to know that anxiety is a part of life. It's a part of a healthy life. It's a part of what makes you human. The fact that you're not invincible, the fact that there are struggles, the fact that this is part of the life that we have here in Israel, which is what I would encourage parents to tell their kids. And the fact that that doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong. It actually means that we're strengthening ourselves and becoming more resolved to live the life that we want to live. And I think that's an important message, maybe in some ways, especially for anxious kids, to hear. Not to try to put out all the fires of anxiety, not to accommodate them, to let them to sit with it a little bit, and then to let them share that with you. And I help them identify what it is. So now these are tools that we can use as parents as well.
You mentioned that for an obsessive compulsive person, you might suggest they put their hand in the toilet, or if somebody has a fear of speaking, then they should just do that. And in such a way, they presumably, maybe I'm reading too much into this, they're still here, they can tell the story, and they survive somehow.
Correct.
The problem with the anxiety we're talking about today, which admittedly is an extreme and hopefully atypical form of anxiety, is that the things they're afraid of are something which you hopefully will, but can't necessarily promise you will survive. When a kid goes to the army, you can't tell the kid, oh, I guarantee you'll be fine. You don't know. Everyone who goes to the army is putting themselves in danger. So
Correct.
how do you deal with that in particular? Because you're not saying, see, you're still okay. You can't say that.
You can say that the anxiety is okay, and the anxiety is actually not deadly. Anxiety is not what kills people. I'll make that very clear. Anxiety will not kill you. It won't kill your kids. It won't kill anybody who you know. Anxiety doesn't kill people. My clinic, Center for Anxiety in New York, which is now part of the Links Network, has treated over 10,000 individuals over the last 15 years. At McLean Hospital, the teams that I work with have treated another 15,000 people. And high anxiety alone, take a guess how many casualties I've seen from people like overheating because of anxiety or their heart exploding because of anxiety or an aneurysm.
Based on what you just said, I'm going to guess the answer is zero.
The answer is zero. And of all my colleagues in all, medical schools around the world who are doing clinical work, who are in, clinical settings, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of patients over 2-3 decades of work in different places. Take a guess how many casualties I know of high anxiety.
Again, zero. Wow. I mean, it's not even a contributing factor. I think of people with heart disease, they have high blood pressure.
That's a factor. Sure.
On its own, it will not do what you're saying.
Anxiety? No. Heart disease? Sure. Cardiovascular problems? 100%. Pulmonary? No question. Anxiety?
Okay. So learn to embrace the anxiety, and then I guess we can move on to letting go. What does
We
that
can
mean?
try. We can try. This is the hard one. This is the hard one. In some ways, I think this is easier in Israel because it's so palpably clear that you don't have control. Control and anxiety and uncertainty are like so tied together. When we realize the lack of control and the lack of certainty we have in this world, it makes us feel anxious. It's a natural response to feel a little bit uncomfortable until we lean into it and actually let go and accept that we were never supposed to have control in the first place.
That's so interesting. I'll tell you that I read something from Rav Soloveitchik, I think from around 1939, right before World War II.
Wow.
I believe that year something happened in Great Britain where essentially they tried to renege on the Balfour Declaration or whichever particular white paper. I don't remember the specific historical details. And in this speech, which I read not that long ago, I took it very seriously because it's not my natural way of speaking or way of thinking, but it is what you're saying now. He essentially said, everyone is freaking out. Again, I'm paraphrasing. He didn't say freaking out, but he said, everyone is freaking out and I'm not. He says, because that's not how I think about things. Because when you're a Torah Jew and things go really well, you don't get too excited because you know, Gamza Yavor, this can change too. And when things get really bad, you also don't get too upset because this will also change. And we know that somebody else is in charge and ultimately we're not writing the narrative. So we don't get too high and we don't get too low either. And it sounds a little bit like that's what you're saying now.
Exactly what I'm saying. And it's part of the human condition. And I've explained this to many secular audiences. These 4 steps I've trained and taught more than 1 million people on how to implement these 4 steps with which is outside of the frum world, obviously. Like now in this conversation, given your audience, we can actually, get down to the Makoros and talk about, where this comes from and our very rich heritage, which has brought this aspect of Emunah and Bitachon, which is clearly related to anxiety. I even have research on the subject. And I think that this letting go is something that is a very human thing. And when people just acknowledge that as a human, you are not in control, that would be like one darga or one level. Then there's another thing, which is what you're saying, which is that Hashem is in control. And I think that that's exactly where we need to go to as community members, and especially people in Israel with that incredible God consciousness that you need to get through this crisis and every other.
It's reminiscent of that which Rabbi Tarfon says in Pirkei Avot, Lo alacha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin libatel mimena. It's not your job to finish the work, but on the other hand, you also can't remain on the sidelines. You can't say, well, God's in charge, because that's also a mistake to say that Hashem's in charge, therefore I'm going to be a pacifist. That's not what we believe in either.
Yeah, well, you can choose. Hakol tzafui versus Nisuna, also Pirkei Avos. Everything is revealed. Whatever is going to be is going to be. And by the way, the Ramchal said this. The Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto wrote about this in, I think it's in the Das Tunos, that you are placed into space and time. How much control do human beings have over space and time?
Over space and time? In the mathematical sense, none, I suppose.
None, right? When, where, and whether you were born, were those factors that were in your bechira, in your choice?
Not that I recall.
Okay, what about your kids, whether they be male or female?
Right.
What year they'd be born in, and if your kids are going to the army, which platoon they would end up in? Their intellectual profile, which is part of their, part of a massive part of the assessment, which places them here or there. Their physical profile, whether they have flat feet, whether they have, whether their spinal cord, was formed in a certain way in utero. Like all of these factors, space, time, health, success, are not within human control. What we have Rishus Nesuna. We have the ability to make choices to live a valued life. And are you doing that? That's the beauty of letting go, is that once we actually accept we're not in control of so many things, then we can really live the life we want. That's the gift of anxiety. Lean into the fact that we don't have control, and then you end up with yourself. It's a gift. It's a gift.
There's a halacha that when you say Shem Hashem, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, you're supposed to think how he is master of everything. Aleph Dal Nun Yud, that idea that he's in charge. And when you say Elokeinu in a bracha, you think he's the source of all power. And because, as I understand it, at least according to some poskim, you can't think about that every time you say a bracha. It's just not practical. Make sure every morning you think about it in the first bracha you say, or one of the early brachot you say, and that will kind of carry you across. For myself, when I say that Yud Kei Vav Kei, when I say that Aleph Daled Nun Yud, the thing that I try to think is, remember, he's in charge, to get myself started in the day that way.
Yeah.
Whether or not it actually affects me, I don't know, but hopefully it can at least establish some sort of framework for the day.
There's no question that it affects you. Those are micro moments that you have and that others have and that we choose on a daily basis. And I think it's a great avoda. Even if it's, like you said, a once a day point, twice a day, 3 times, whatever it is that a person's doing, it's hard to have that God consciousness all the time. One key that anxiety will help you do is remind you, hey, I need to work on this, right? It's like an internal barometer, like, hey, I'm holding on too much to control here because my body is trying to maintain an illusion and a sense of control because I feel uncomfortable with the fact that I'm not in control. I obviously need to work on this, and that's the calling. That's the calling of the nefesh, of the body, saying, please, let's develop our emunah and bitachon, just like you said.
Before we continue, a quick note. Paid subscribers to Orthodox Conundrum Commentary on Substack receive bonus material with every episode. That includes early release podcasts, ad-free listening, and extended bonus segments that go deeper into the ideas we discuss here. In the bonus section of today's episode, I reflect on something Dr. Rosmarin said about anxiety and uncertainty. I explore how that idea might connect to the story of Adam and Eve and the Tree of Knowledge, the human desire to eliminate mystery, and the unfortunate tendency to try to explain everything as if we're actually privy to God's deepest secrets. And I suggest that real faith may actually require the opposite, learning to live with uncertainty rather than trying to control it. You can hear that full bonus segment by becoming a paid subscriber to Orthodox Conundrum Commentary on Substack. You can find the link in the description of this podcast. And now, back to the episode. How about doing things that actually can lead to greater anxiety, not in a way that is necessarily healthy? I'm thinking of what they call doom scrolling, which a lot of people have been doing constantly ever since October 7th. We had a bit of a break, and now we're back to doing it again. Reading the news constantly, doom scrolling. Is that healthy or is that unhealthy in your opinion?
Great question. There's a very fascinating piece of research that was done on the science of worry by a professor named Dr. Tom Borkovec at Penn State University. And Borkovec turned the concepts of worry on its head. And I think he did a great service to the field and to the world by doing so. Let me ask you, is worry a thought or a behavior?
Ooh. I mean, I would have said an emotion, but that's obviously not one of the options.
Okay. Okay. Worry is associated
I think it's
with
a
emotions
thought.
Right. But worry really happens up here. What Borkovec noticed is that people who worry, people who doom scroll, right? Then the modern version of worry is doom scrolling because it's like externalized to ourselves on our phones, right? No one knows how to think internally anymore, so it all has to be done computerized. So basically doom scrolling is like a worry that a person's doing by just going over and over and over and over and over whatever it is that they're going through. He noticed that people who worry actually are not penetrating to that deep core of their anxiety.
What do you mean?
Most people who worry do so at a superficial level. What if this? What if that? What if this? What if that? And then they create a low-level, constant anxiety in their world by remaining here. What Borkovec understood is that that's actually a behavior. That's an avoidance behavior. It's in a way of keeping your head engaged so that way you don't have to engage your heart. So what he tinted, so to speak, what he held, what he shlugged up was this concept of worry being a cognition and understanding that it actually is an avoidance behavior. It's a way of keeping your emotions at bay. Doom scrolling does make you anxious, but at a low level because you're not really thinking about what you're truly anxious about.
So it's almost a distraction from what's really bothering you.
Correct.
Because it remains on the surface.
Correct. Now, it doesn't look like it, which is why what he said was such a great concept. It was really godless. But at the core of worry is an avoidance of what you're really afraid of. What I would encourage somebody with doom scrolling is either to look at something really terrifying or to put down their phone and to identify what it is that they're truly worried about at the highest level internally, and then to share it with someone else.
Why would you say look at something truly terrifying?
Usually doom scrolling is just like it's rapid fire, right? What's the average length of people's exposure in Instagram? It's like 4 seconds, 5 seconds. So that's just a low level superficial thing. Like look at something truly terrifying for 3 minutes a day and actually watch the whole thing. That'll help you. That's embrace. That's the
Because
embrace
you're embracing
strategy.
it. Ah,
Correct.
okay. Well, Dr. Rosmarin, I want to ask you, because it seems to me, again, I'm not a sociologist, but in much of the Western world and in Judaism too, there's a lot of emphasis on courage. I'm not speaking about the Pirkei Avot, Ezu Gibor Kovesh et Yisro, but more of the standard, oh, he's courageous. He's willing to not be worried, not be afraid. And I think that's probably associated with not being anxious. In fact, it's an essential virtue. He's courageous. Chazak ve'ematz. Be strong and of good courage. So how does that work together with what you're saying now? Does that mean that that idea of courage as a virtue is not really correct, or we're misunderstanding it?
It's exactly what I'm saying. Chazak ve'amatz means you need to be mechazek yourself, which means you feel anxious. There is no courage without anxiety. There is no such thing as being courageous unless you have some sort of adversity, some sort of struggle, some sort of difficulty. I'll tell you something I heard once.
That's fantastic.
Rabbi Yisrael, amazing, right?
Yeah,
Rabbi Yisrael Reifman, who's one of the Avrechim here in Boston, one of the young Galite who's learning, and his wife is actually the Menahalis of the school here. Very wonderful, amazing family. I was talking to him about these, concepts after davening one Shabbos morning, and he said, "Oh, it's a pasuk." I'm like, "Great, show me, please. Like, I'd love to see this." He said, "Yisrael, ki sarisa im Elokim v'tuchal." So the Malach, the angel, comes to Jacob, to Yaakov, and says, "Your name will not be Jacob anymore. Your name will be Yisrael, ki sarisa, because you struggled im Elohim with angels, with me, v'tuchal, and you conquered." So what should his name be? You struggled with the angel and you conquered him. His name should be conquered. Tuchal. Why isn't our name Tuchal or Tichal or Tachal or something around that line? Why is it Kisarisa? Yisrael, the root of Israel is Sarisa, which means to struggle.
So we're named after the struggle, not after the success.
It's actually our name. Our name is not Tuchal. Our name is Yisrael, because struggle, anxiety, is a part of our heritage, which is why Jews are so anxious. I'm kidding.
That's fantastic.
But that's part of what being courageous, that is actually the core element of being courageous is that struggle, that difficulty. And, the entropic factors in this world are drowned out by the light. And that's exactly what we're seeing today.
What you're saying now, Dr. Rosmarin, relates well to an idea I've had for some time. We often say that the great heroes of Jewish history, our ancestors, for example, are associated with certain midot, certain attributes. Each person is associated with a certain attribute. He embodied this divine attribute. A great example of this is Yitzchak, who embodied the idea of gvura, which means holding back or courage. And it's interesting because when we think about Yitzchak holding back, often in the colloquial imagination, we think of Isaac as this otherworldly spiritual person who was barely part of the human race. He was almost an angel. And there may be some truth to that. But if we look in the Torah itself, certainly in the simple understanding of the verses, Yitzchak was actually perhaps the most physical of all of our ancestors. Yitzchak was a person who asked his son to bring him food because he enjoyed eating food. We see Yitzchak being intimate with his wife, Rebekah, not for the sake of procreation. And that's quite unusual. While the Torah has a very positive view of marital sex, nevertheless, in terms of the stories of our ancestors, we very rarely, if at all, see this idea of intimacy not for the sake of procreation being talked about, and here it is. So in that sense, the fact that Yitzchak is considered the epitome of gevura, of holding back, or perhaps even better, of directing it, it's not that he was naturally a person who had no connection to the world, and he naturally did not have a yetzer hara, an evil inclination. Instead, it means he very much had one. He simply was adept at directing it in a holy direction. All of this adds up in the end to saying that my feeling is that Yitzchak naturally had to work on himself. He had a strong Yetzer Hara, strong inclination towards physical things, and only through hard work was he able to achieve that midah, that attribute of gvura, of controlling it in a specific way.
Very interesting. Yeah, often, here, I'll give you another example. The word nefesh and neshama couldn't be more conceptually different. An animal has a nefesh, only human beings have neshama, a soul, a part of God. Yet those words are almost interchangeable throughout. You see it in Chazal. You certainly see it in the Sefer Musar and Sefer Kabbalah. The nefesh and neshama are interchangeable, and often, just like anxiety is part of courage, and like you're saying, like sometimes with midos, with character, yeah, the opposite is often the case. Chesed is right. Rape is chesed is loving kindness. Very strange. So obviously not. Like we have this concept that opposites are. I'm talking about one of the verses of the Torah, obviously, in that case. So yes, this is the complexity and the beauty of life.
I'd like to move on then to
Sure.
Orthodox life in particular.
Okay.
We have our certain rituals, whether it's davening every day, we learn Torah. We have mitzvot woven throughout our lives. And I'm wondering, from a psychological standpoint, does that structure help us in managing anxiety in a healthy way? And the second half of that question is, what do we do, if that's true, when some of those are not available? And I'm thinking specifically about something which we had this past week here in Israel, which has now changed, but that we were not allowed to go to minyan. We weren't allowed to go to shul, at least. And for many people, going to shul and davening b'tzibur with a quorum is an essential part of their community involvement. So
100%.
First of all, how do these things help us, and what do we do when they disappear?
It's a good question. Okay, firstly, it's always a double-edged sword. There's no free lunch, there's no free ticket, and if it could only be so simple that I could just prescribe people to engage in XYZ ritual and then they would be free from all the vicissitudes of human life, then believe me, I would have been on it. It's just not so simple. Like even going to shul, you go there and there's someone who's annoying, or they're davening too fast, or they're davening too slow, or you show up late, or there's traffic, or you can't find a parking spot. There's no free lunch. So we have to understand that whatever ritual it is that we have is not going to be a ticket, but it is a tool. And those tools are important. You can't build a house without, hammers and saws and whatever it is, and nail guns. So you can't do it with your bare hands, but it doesn't mean that those tools are going to build the house. You have to use them in the appropriate way. And the mitzvos are there to help us. And they are potentially each opportunity we have to engage with that, whether it's tefillah b'tzibur or going to, davening in a minyan, as you said, in a quorum, or any other aspect. And when those are taken away from us, it's harder to build that house, right? It's one less tool that you have in your toolkit. But I don't want people getting sort of like stuck on it, like it has to be that way, and you can't. Like there are many ways to build the house, and there are adaptations, and there are different creative strategies that we have to have when we don't have those, for whatever reasons. Geopolitical war being one of them, or COVID being another, or just feeling sick or not being able to go, or financial reasons. We have to take the opportunities that we have, and I really do see them as potential tools that we can use. And that's sort of the model that I would invoke in this situation.
Okay. Let me ask you about parents. You mentioned before how important it is for parents to model, but I'd like you to expand upon that a little bit. What should parents be thinking vis-a-vis their children, whether they're younger or older? How can they talk about anxiety and managing anxiety and embody that method in a healthy way?
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to go through the 4 steps again, and I'm going to do it for parents dealing with their kids. Identify. Do it with me. Identify.
Share. Embrace. And let go.
Let go. Okay, fine. So let's do all 4. Identify. When your kids come home and they're feeling anxious, a lot of parents feel like, oh my God, my kid feels anxious. Something's wrong. They're going to have an anxiety problem. They're not going to be able to function. I've done something wrong as a parent. They start catastrophizing. First, stop and check your own anxiety, but also help your kid to identify theirs. Hey, I noticed that you look like you're feeling a little anxious. Is everything okay? What's on your mind? Most parents, especially Jewish parents, when their kids come home and feel uncomfortable, they will put food in front of them. They'll distract them, they'll learn with them, which can be great, but they are not actually helping them to process the feelings. You want to give them a little snack first and then have a conversation about their anxiety with them? No problem. But make sure you have that conversation and help them to identify what it is that they're concerned about.
Then let me ask you a question about that, because you jump to, I see my kid is looking a little bit anxious. But I bet that many kids are already in denial. And by the time they get home, they don't look anxious at all. But should I try and say, hey, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Because you look great, but you got to be scared about what's going on, or something like that.
It's a good question.
Maybe especially here in Israel, where I think
I'm thinking,
being strong is a very big value.
Exactly. I was just thinking about the cultural difference between American and like, if an American kid is anxious, they're going to show you, right? Like that's just we're weak over here. It's going to come out.
I talked to my kid in the army, and how are you? Sababa. And it might be true. I'm not saying otherwise, but
you might be in a situation of at patachlo, right? Like you have to open up the conversation to them because they're in eno l'shol. They don't know how to ask the question because of their culture, ironically. So I would say something. Yeah, I might say something along the lines of like, hey, like, it's kind of tense, and we're not going to school these days, and and just checking in. How are things going? Like sababa, really, or like sababa? There's something on your mind. So if you make it sort of from a family culture perspective that you speak about your feelings, your kids will talk about it. At some point, they'll open up to you.
That's important advice. I hear that.
Help them to identify and then help them to share.
Is there a way you should tell them you don't have to share with me, but you should share with somebody? Is that?
Yeah, but it's a great thing to share with your parents. I mean, if you can do that, then I think it's a really good, I think especially in Israel, like family bonds are critical, and people need their parents. Israeli kids need their parents a lot more than they think. Let's be honest.
Yeah. There's no
They're
question.
Like, no, I'm fine. I'm on my own. Like, no, you're not. Like, you need your parents. So if they can share it with you, bonus points. If they'll share it with someone else, share it with a friend, share it with somebody, that's fine. At least it's something. And I'll take it. I'll take the win.
I think the hard one probably is getting your kids to embrace. At least I anticipate that would be the hard one to do.
Yeah. I think, firstly, just talking about it will be embracing it to some degree. But I think it's less it's less relevant in times of war where you are embracing, like you are just facing adversity. Like you don't have to try; it's just happening to you, right?
Right, of course. Right. But how about letting go? How do you get your kids to let go?
So that's where we can speak about not being in control, not having certainty, and the fact that that's part of the human condition. And whatever language makes sense for your family, given, your specific religious culture, where your kids are holding, where you're holding, in terms of your own belief, in terms of their belief, it has to be genuine. Like you can't, but there's different ways to convey this. It could be that like, I'm just a human being and I'm not in control, and I'm around for however many years that I'm on this earth, and I came into this earth on such and such a day, and I'm going to leave it on such and such a day. I don't know when that is. And at the points in between, all I can do is this. And I've sort of made peace with that. How are you doing with it? Like it could be something that heavy and that heady level if you have a, more of a philosophically inclined kid or more secularly inclined kid, or it could be something like, this is emunah and bitachon, and this is what, Chazal teach us. And it depends on, this is what our sources are, and learning the chovos halevavos with them, learning the duties of the heart with your kids. There are different ways to do it, but I think conversation about accepting the limits of our control, letting go, letting God, there's an analogy that I've given on a lot of secular podcasts and stuff like that, which is the plane. When I get onto a plane, I sit in my seat, I fasten my seatbelt, and I am so thankful that I'm not in the cockpit. I don't want to be flying the plane. I don't know how to fly the plane. I wouldn't be an effective pilot. And frankly, I'm kind of happy being off duty from having to look at directions and stuff for the next 2 to 3 hours or however long. And like, I'm going to sit back and, drink my club soda.
So letting go can actually be empowering, paradoxically enough.
It should be.
Very interesting.
What do we want to get to?
I mean, I often think about Rabbi Jonathan Sachs-Tetzal, how he said that, I hope I'm quoting him correctly, that faith is the courage to live with uncertainty.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
how about leaders, rabbis and shuls, people in general who want to help their communities cope in this kind of way? In general, is there something that they can do in order to help them deal with anxiety, other than the obvious teach them chovos halevavos and other aspects
Yeah.
of emunah bitachon? Is there something they can do
Yeah.
in a visceral, direct level?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the rabbi's role is in step 4, the letting go and helping people to, develop their faith. And I think that actually is a very wonderful and important community service. When you have somebody in the community who has their head on straight and recognizes and has grappled with the uncertainty and has, as you put it, the courage to accept uncertainty, was it?
The courage to live with uncertainty. That's
To
what I
live with
believe the
uncertainty.
line was.
Yeah, so we all need, a rabbi sax, so to speak, or something of that, someone of that ilk in our community that we can go to who can help us, help infuse us with that belief at the level that we're on. Um, I also think like there's a lot of pastoral care, a lot of pastoral care. I don't know if you know this. Clergy are actually twice as likely to get mental health referrals as mental health clinicians, even in the United States.
Interesting.
So often people share with their Rav, the Rebbitzin, whoever it is, what they're going through. And I think those are very special moments. So for the rabbis who are comfortable having conversations with congregants about their marriages, about their families, about their anxiety, about their struggles, I think it's a huge communal service as long as it's done in check. I like to say, if it's an hour a month, I think that's a reasonable amount. And if it's more, probably somebody needs something more professional or a different structure. Can't have everybody in the community going more than an hour a month to the local rabbi, right? It doesn't work.
Yeah, that wouldn't work. I mean, I do say, however, that I think it's important for rabbis and other communal professionals also to know what's above their own pay grade. In other words, one of the big problems is when they think they can solve a problem, they're simply not equipped to do so.
Yeah, although rabbis can do a lot more than you think.
Oh, yeah.
If they're willing and feel comfortable having those conversations. I think it's more a matter of time.
That's fair enough. I'm going to ask you a question that's somewhat personal now, because I'm fortunate enough to have a podcast. And there are many other people who are listening who have podcasts or who are influencers or who have a YouTube channel or they're writers, and they have essentially a public voice. Is there something which you would recommend that people who do have a public voice should do in order to use that voice to engender healthy anxiety rather than the black cloud form of anxiety that's associated with doom scrolling and all the negative parts that are not healthy?
I'll tell you what I'll tell my clinicians. You got to work on yourself. Your ability to help others is 100% determined on how full your cup is. Whatever comes out of your podcast or influencer platform, or even being a clinician, being a doctor, being a rabbi, is the same thing. It's the shirayim that come over the edge of the cup. The cup has to be full, and whatever spills over to the side, that's what goes to other people. That's how you have to keep your cup full. So if you want to help people with their anxiety, you got to grapple with your own. Believe me, I have grappled with my own anxiety. Let me tell you, these 4 steps were hard fought, my friend. This is not just professional wisdom. This is personal, hard fought wisdom that I know in my gut is true because I have practiced these. Holy moly. Maybe not at the level that I would have if I lived in Israel, mind you. There's always different madrigos and different levels in people's lives. But given where I'm at, believe me, I fought for these.
That's empowering to hear that as well. I appreciate hearing that and you're sharing that. That's so important. Let me ask you, as we come close to the end of our conversation, some sources, you mentioned the Ramchal, you mentioned Chovot HaLevavot. Are there some specific Sfarim or books that you have used as sources of inspiration and that you would recommend to other people to use that can engender the combination of faith and living with the uncertainty that comes with anxiety?
Sure. The Chovos HaLevavos Shahar Bitachon, the 4th section of the duties of the heart, also known as the Gate of Trust in God, is just a go-to. I mean, it was written in the 11th century, originally in Arabic, by the way, translated later into Hebrew, and now there are plenty of English translations for the Anglos out there. It's just been a go-to for, nearly 1,000 years of Jewish history of dealing with anxiety. People have gone to the Chovos HaLevavos. So yeah, that's just a must, an aspect. Another piece, aside from Svarim, aside from Makoros, things to read is davening, prayer. One of the maybe the goal of prayer is to recognize the limits of our control, and when we're petitioning or asking asking for help from God, that's a recognition. And it's not even subconscious. It's actually quite conscious that these things have to come from above because they don't come from me. That's an opportunity, and that in the Orthodox world where people are praying 3 times a day, that's also a tremendous opportunity in addition to learning.
That's a beautiful and important idea. I know that davening is dafka, in my understanding, in my hashkafat olam, the way we relate to Hashem as a parent, whereas limud haTorah, learning Torah, is much more relating to Hashem as a chavruta, as a friend, as someone you can talk to. When we daven, however, that's when we say, I realize that I'm dependent. When I learn, we're, so to speak, equals, as Chazal say in that sense. However, we understand that we're on the same level. The famous story in Bava Metzia Daf Nun Tet, where Hashem said, my children have defeated me. They paskined against what I said, and they're allowed to do that. But in Tefillah, we don't do that. In Tefillah, we say, really, it's up to you.
Very interesting.
Well, Dr. Rosmarin, this has been extremely important and extremely helpful. And everybody listening owes you a debt of gratitude for sharing your heart and sharing your ideas. And I'm very, very grateful that you joined me today on such short notice. And hopefully we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
My honor and pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to offer a word of thanks to our Patreon supporters. Patreon functions as a voluntary tip jar for Jewish Coffee House and our family of podcasts. Patreon supporters at all levels, as well as paid subscribers to Orthodox Conundrum Commentary, will have access to our upcoming private Q&A sessions. Your support in either place helps sustain thoughtful Jewish conversation. Additional bonus material, including the longer episodes with bonus questions, is available to paid subscribers of Orthodox Conundrum Commentary on Substack. No matter how you choose to support this work, we are deeply grateful. Subscribe to the Orthodox Conundrum podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and please rate it and write a review. I'd appreciate it if you go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the Orthodox Conundrum. It takes literally 2 minutes. It's just giving a certain number of stars and writing 1 or 2 sentences. Please like the Orthodox Conundrum podcast on Facebook and join our growing Facebook group, the Orthodox Conundrum Discussion Group, where you can feel free to discuss issues in Orthodoxy in an honest and friendly environment. Subscribe to my Substack, Orthodox Conundrum Commentary. Check out the link in the description of this podcast to get your free subscription today. Finally, do you have a message that needs to get out? Do you want to promote your business, your organization, or your cause? The best way is by producing a podcast, and Jewish Coffee House can make it happen. I have experience producing hundreds of podcasts, both for myself and for satisfied clients. Whether you want to learn everything you need in one day, or relax and record and let me do the heavy lifting, Jewish Coffee House Productions will work with you to make it happen and make it even better than you imagined. Let me help you today. Write to us at aliza@jewishcoffeehouse.com. That's ALIZA @jewishcoffeehouse.com. And let's get started with your high-quality, memorable, and effective podcast. I'm Scott Kahn. This has been the Orthodox Conundrum on jewishcoffeehouse.com.